I think we place undue burdens on our relationships by not going to therapy. I personally believe that everybody can benefit from therapy, but not every therapist is for everybody. I think to an extent, we are all experienced, or we have, especially after a pandemic, experienced a certain amount of trauma. And I will say, like, blanketly, most of us were raised with a significant amount of emotional neglect.
Mhm.
Just by virtue of like what was the awareness of our parents and the access to resources at that time. A lot of us were emotionally neglected,
Mhm.
which can be maybe not necessarily a trauma for all of us, but it's certainly something that can show up really dramatically in interpersonal relationships, at work, at home, anywhere. And so I'd say whether or not you believe you've experienced trauma, you don't need to have trauma in order to go to therapy.
What's up, you guys? It's your girl Bianca Bee, and welcome to the Bianca Bee Show, where we talk about business, finances, and friendships. I'm super excited about today's guest. She is a speaker, she is an author, she is a therapist and coach. Her recent book, Could It Be Better, is amazing, and I'm super excited to talk to her today. You guys know how I feel about my therapists out there, and so I'm super excited. So, Cher, how are you?
I'm doing really well. Thanks for having me.
Yes,
Appreciate it.
thank you. So I love to start each episode with an icebreaker question. My question for you today is, what's one hobby or activity that always helps you relax?
Oh, this might like really ruffle some feathers, but one of the things that really helps me relax is actually doing house projects, like doing things with my hands and not my brain. Helps, it just does something to my nervous system that calms it down. Not to say that they don't also stress me out sometimes, but I find it really therapeutic to just have something really tangible, because my work isn't always as tangible that immediately, at least. So that would be it. Do yourself projects.
I love that. I love that. I'm horrible at that. I'm like, I have to go on Pinterest or I make my boyfriend do it. Like, I'm just like not into it, but I love that. I love that you're able to do that.
Yeah, I definitely recruit people to help for sure, especially when it's getting just overwhelming, but
Mhm.
something therapeutic for me. Yeah.
Awesome. So I want to kind of dive into your experience and your knowledge and your business. First and foremost, how did you become a therapist? What was that light bulb for you where you wanted to start helping others?
The light bulb really went off when we were foster parents for the foster care system, and we adopted an almost 8-year-old kiddo from the system. I have a lot of mixed feelings around adoption, but that's where our experience began, and I was introduced to social work. So I have a master's in social work. I decided to go back to school and become a therapist that specialized in seeing kids that was experienced in trauma, because not every therapist, believe it or not, has a background in trauma.
Mm.
And also just in adoption, it was really difficult to find a therapist that could support our kiddo and our family at that time. So went back to graduate school for that, and then kind of just had this. I was a bit older, I was in my mid 30s when that happened. And so I just had this kind of lens of waiting for things to call to me and kind of ping me along the journey. And so what happened is that I ended up like saying yes to a job working in education. And I was a school counselor and social worker for a while, worked with kids and adults,
Mhm.
and then have just kind of woven together this really interesting, at least interesting for me, career of teaching adults, essentially teaching adults the skills they were never taught to be well.
Mm.
I was teaching it to kids when I was an elementary school counselor, and I was like, wait a second, I never had this education. Most of the adults who are teaching these kids never had this education. And because we didn't have that education, we were causing harm to kids. If
Mm.
we're not self-aware and self-regulated, if we're not socially aware and able to allow a kiddo to show up in our space with their own race, culture, beliefs, everything, and hold space for them, we can cause a lot of hurt and harm. And so that has just become my pathway, is to really harm reduction, I guess, by teaching people these skills that, again, we never had this education in.
I want to dive into that because I'm like almost a year into therapy and I love therapy. It was the best thing I could have ever done in my 30s and I enjoy it. I love what I like, love my therapist. And so I realized that a lot of things is trauma and your upbringing and how you were brought up. For the person that's afraid to go to therapy,
Yeah.
what tips and advice would you give to them? Because it's really hard, especially when you're someone who's stuck in your ways. Oh, I don't need a therapist. Oh, I can go to my friend. I don't need a therapist. I'm okay. Everybody thinks they're okay. What advice
Well,
would you give to people?
well, one of the things that you said really stands out to me. Is just like, oh, I can talk to my friend about this. I think we place undue burdens on our relationships by not going to therapy, meaning I could have a probably, better relationship with a friend or a partner if I didn't always dump my stuff on them. If I had a place that was safe for me to process things and then bring more of that processed work to my relationships, I think it's just a benefit. It's a gift to people that we're in relationship with. So that's one thing. Everybody can benefit. Um, Another thing around therapy is just one, I do believe, and I'm biased, I get that. I personally believe that everybody can benefit from therapy, but not every therapist is for everybody. Um, do some shopping around.
Hmm.
Most therapists, and if they don't, then they may not be the best fit for you, but most therapists will offer a free 15 to 20-minute consultation. I do that because I want to see if that person is a fit for me. At this point in my career, I tend to just attract like the perfect clients. Like, we're a great match. They read my website, they've seen me on social maybe, and so they'll gravitate towards me, and it tends to be a really good fit. But I do that because I want to see if, one, I can help,
Hmm.
and two, if we're, vibing together, because you have to get an idea that you can be safe with this person enough over time to build trust and be vulnerable and really dig into some things. So shop around and find a therapist, ask them questions. You can chat GPT it.
Yeah.
You can Google what are questions to ask a therapist, but um ask them some questions about how they do therapy, and work with somebody who will help you skill build. It's
Mhm.
not just about listening to you and that sort of thing, but they're really going to use modalities that are super effective and helping you rewire your brain and your body, your nervous system, essentially. And also just teach you those interpersonal skills, call you in on your shit, that sort of thing. You need someone like that. I'm a therapist who sees a therapist, and most of the therapists I know also see a therapist.
Mhm.
So it's just good work to have someone show you the spots that you need to pay attention to.
Yeah, and you also do coaching too. Now, explain the
Mhm.
difference because everyone has their viewpoint on a therapist and a coach. Explain the difference in your opinion, and how do you know when it's time to get a therapist and when it's time to get a coach? I believe in
Yeah.
having both,
Yeah.
but I want to hear your viewpoint.
I agree. And I've worked personally with both also. I've worked with health coaches that are super amazing. And then obviously, like I said, I have worked with therapists. So, coaching, I think there can be some overlap just in the way that you show up and create safe spaces for that person to kind of dig into whatever it is the theme of your coaching that you provide. I think the overlap, the place where it crosses over into really wanting somebody who has one, just more checks and balances. So, meaning I have, ethics that I have to align with. I have a board, that a behavioral health that is watching, that clients can, they can cite, they can call them and say, hey, this is something that I don't like that Cher's doing, or that's not okay, or whatever it is. That's never happened to me, but it's an avenue for people. It's a platform, right, for them to be able to alert people if someone is, not practicing in an ethical way or appropriately. And so I think anything that crosses over into the realm of trauma, I think you really need to have someone who's super skilled at helping you navigate that. I would just be really wary of digging into that with a coach unless they have had extensive education in that realm. And so if it's, health coaching here or business coaching or even life coaching when you're in a big transition, but you don't really feel like it's trauma related, coaches are a wonderful resource. Just anything that feels deeper than that, I would seek out a therapist, a skilled therapist.
Going into trauma, does everyone have trauma?
So, so let's first of all, the definition, really high level, of trauma is that it's an experience or a series of experiences or events that your nervous system doesn't have the psychological capacity to navigate. Like it just doesn't have the skill, capacity, whatever it is, to navigate. Trauma is very relative, meaning what's traumatic to me may not be to you, Bianca, and vice versa. Um, and I think to an extent, we are all experienced, or we have, especially after a pandemic, experienced a certain amount of trauma. And I will say, like, blanketly, most of us were raised with a significant amount of emotional neglect.
Mhm.
Just by virtue of like what was the awareness of our parents and the access to resources at that time. A lot of us were emotionally neglected,
Mhm.
which can be maybe not necessarily a trauma for all of us, but it's certainly something that can show up really dramatically in interpersonal relationships, at work, at home, anywhere. And so I'd say whether or not you believe you've experienced trauma, you don't need to have trauma in order to go to therapy. You can go
Mhm.
there just to learn how to be better in relationships, to navigate that tricky work thing or whatever it is, you feel stuck.
Mhm.
Um, and I think a lot of times people show up like, "Oh, I just feel kind of off." And then you dig and you're like, "Oh, there's the trauma piece." Not that you're digging and trying to find the things, but it shows up. And so I would invite everybody to pay attention to coaching or therapy or therapy.
I love that you mentioned feeling stuck. A lot of us feel stuck, and it's starting very young. Like in your early 20s, people feel like they need to be here. And I was definitely one of those people that, like, oh, I feel stuck. I'm not successful. I'm not this way. And what tips or advice can you give to people who are feeling stuck? I know each person is different, each age group is different, but
Mhm.
overall with your clients, what have like, what are some tips that you can give to people?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that feels very fresh for me. And top of mind because I have 4 young adult children. So they range from 18 to 24
uh,
years old. And several of them are experiencing that. Clients experience it all the time. I think something to pay attention to in your 20s is, one, your brain is still like pruning and creating neural connections and establishing itself. And so we often expect so much of our brains and bodies in our early to mid 20s that it can be very overwhelming to our nervous system. So just keep in mind that we want to be very present and know um, that everything is kind of happening the way that it's meant to happen. If we're in our bodies and we're making choices from a place of self regulation with the best knowledge that we have at the time, then we want to just focus on developing that self trust to connect and make decisions in the moment from an embodied place, instead of kind of getting in our heads and over analyzing, which can create a lot of anxiety,
mhm,
depression. And we just kind of end up sitting in the soup of stuckness instead of saying, "Hey, what's my next best step? I'm feeling stuck right now. I don't know what's all the way over here because I can't even imagine picking a career or a partner that's going to be for a long term. So I'm just going to say, what's my next best step?"
I
And
love that.
oftentimes that next best step it needs to be something that's within your own bubble space. It's your own thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that can shift, versus wanting something else to shift kind of outside of you, if that makes sense. So practicing self trust, practicing self regulation, and asking yourself, what's the next best step, which is one of, the many helpful questions we can ask ourselves.
I love that. And then going into your book,
Mhm.
could it be better? Can you tell us
Mhm.
a little bit about that and a little of the backstory of creating this book?
Yeah. So just working with folks over the years and seeing some of these really foundational skills that we were never taught, but seeing how much they landed with the thousands of educators I've worked with and consulted with over the years and clients, just seeing these tools and strategies that can be such game changers for folks. And I also felt like there's kind of a gap in what was out there. There's really academically minded kind of self help books. I wanted this to be in my own voice. I swear kind of a lot. My husband actually edited a part of the book and took about half the swears out. That and a bunch of that's apparently. I say that a lot when I write. I just felt like there's a gap in what was out there of just like someone who maybe wouldn't normally pick up a self-help book, but wanted it in just like a casual, easy voice. It's all evidence-based, best practices, but it's something that's so much more accessible. So
Mhm,
that was, one of the reasons I paid attention to writing a book. Another one is just again laying out those foundational tools that we haven't had that education in, and wanting it to feel very relatable to folks,
mhm,
and accessible. Maybe not everybody can access therapy and coaching, but can spend 10 or $20 on a book that could really be, a game changer for you? Then then I did my job, and it's been really neat to see college students, teenagers, all the way to people who've read probably every self-help book there is, get something from the book. But the title itself comes from just this concept of how teeny tiny shifts in what we think, feel, say, and do can pay off massively over time. So anything can be better, and not in this like hustle. I'm not good enough. I'm never good enough. I have to
yeah,
be perfect. But just in like, I wonder if this could be better. Like, could the way that I receive feedback be better? Could the way that, when I'm upset and I'm feeling really grumpy, could the way that I, navigate that be better? It's just a let's see what could be better kind of thing. So very kind of light, casual, accessible was the goal with the book.
I love that. And what was something that triggered that title for you where you were like, could it be better? Like, was there something in your personal life that made you create that title or that saying or mantra?
Yeah, I think it's just the way that I move through life. It
Mhm,
is just I'm always curious about what could be kind of tweaked, what could be shifted. It's one of the questions that I ask clients all the time, what feels different and better. We want
mhm,
to pay attention to those wins and those victories. And again, it's not in this because I'm not enoughness kind of coming from that space. It's just like, man, I wonder if I could just what's possible? What's the potential of this? I'm just so curious about that piece.
hmm.
What could be better? I wonder about it, What am I reaching my potential? Can we tap into that more and more? And again, with like these little shifts, we absolutely can. So I think it's probably just a bit of part of my personality. I
I
don't
love that.
know.
And
Just
where can people get your book?
You can get it on Amazon.
Mhm.
You can also get a signed copy from me. There's a Venmo link on my website. You just Venmo me, and then put your address in the message box, and I will send a signed copy to you.
Thank
Yeah.
you so much for taking the time to talk to me. It's your girl Bianca B. Make sure you guys follow me at it's Bianca B at Bianca B Show. Bye guys.
Bianca B,